Hello and welcome to all the Autobots and Decepticons out there. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And we've got another Transformers video for you all. Yay! So, yeah, here's Transformers. The next little bit of the movie is basically where Ultra Magnus promises to rescue Spike, or at least to do everything that they can for him, which is not much of a promise. But then he theorizes maybe the Matrix can make short work of Unicron. And Hot Rod, of course, pipes up saying that yes, it can, and that he's got a feeling that it can when he's questioned by Cup. And, well, then Galvatron attacks. And
Something Starscream should have done.
yep. The difference is where Starscream would have probably fumbled it. Galvatron proceeds to lay waste to what remains of Autobot City with minimal effort, having apparently led his transmetalized forces in advance of the main Decepticon force because the rest of them were too slow. Which should go to show how fast these guys travel in comparison to the regular Astro Train and other Decepticon forces and ships. Wow. This was quite the mod Galvatron and his crew got. And immediately, though Ultra Magnus is a good enough shot to damage one of the Decepticons who's transformed into a ship, lightly, most of his shots don't seem to have any effect and generally go wild. And these guys can rapid fire. Let's just be honest. They rapid fire like there's no tomorrow. That said, this is where I'll criticize two characters. Daniel is clearly in a bad situation where even the after effect of a single laser could probably do him in. RC, of course, catches him as he's going to tumble down a cliff. Poor kid. And Hot Rod shows up. Just as RC tells Daniel, like, you better stay close. Hot Rod flirts with her, telling her, you better stay close to me, and she ends up pushing him against a wall just as there's a blast that might have put an end to him, and says, no, you better stay close to me. And the only reason I'll criticize RC and Hot Rod is time and place. Your little, I don't want to say pet, but, like, Daniel's actually in genuine danger. So the two of them out to keep their minds on the job. Because clearly this is not the time and place. Sorry if I criticized them a little. That being said, they're not the... At least they're not the kind of jerks that, say, Silverbolt later was when it came to Black Arachnia. Because, you know, she has a nice slim waist or whatever and big, you know... Thus, we cannot fight her, and if any Maximal goes to attack her, I must attack him, and otherwise have no loyalty. Yeah, Silverbolt pretty much did that. And, or at least he would not fire at her, even as she was firing at the other Maximals. So, yeah, at least Hot Rod and RC, though they're forgetting the location and the situation they're in, are not forgetting which side they're on.
Or friendly firing.
Yeah. As the battle is going south, though, Ultra Magnus, who has his hands full, much as Rat Trap did in Beast Wars whenever he took command, ends up stumbling across one major problem. The Speedster on the team has not gotten the Dinobots on board the ship. Not for lack of trying.
Because you have Grimlock, who's stubborn, and
refuses.
Blur, that's like...
I'm trying! And you have Ultra Magnus. Okay, you know what? New plan. Cup and Hot Rod are, no offense, in the way. They are not contributing to the battle. Hot Rod wants to spend more time looking after Daniel and flirting with RC. Cup is just not contributing. So, as we haven't seen what he's been up to, but we just have to assume he's not contributed. And he's also old. So, the mentality Ultra Magnus has of, I'm assuming, we'll all buy cover. You two who are in the way, get the Dinobots aboard the ship. And besides, Blur's actually a decent fighter. So you need, even putting him on this duty is not the smartest idea. You need him firing back at the Decepticons. He's too valuable a fighter. And I do defend Blur here as a fighter because in the defense of Autobot City, he was an incredible support. Like, honestly, he contributed perhaps more than anyone after Ultra Magnus and Optimus, of course. But Kup is somehow able to persuade one of the Dinobots to basically get on board. Yes, he's pushing him, but he's able to persuade him. If that thing was digging its heels in, Kup could not have done it. I suspect it's because Kup's previously worked with them a few times. So, since they like him, they're willing to listen to him. Give the Dinobots some credit. They respect their elders.
And all they needed was to bring Grimlock aboard and the rest of the Dinobots.
There was one of them before him that's pushed aboard. As for Grimlock, you have Hot Rod who ties up a line, swings it around Grimlock and tells him, "Come on, you big bozo. Me, Grimlock, not bozo." Yeah, is their rebuttal. But Hot Rod's actually right. Grimlock's being a bozo right now.
It's like, it's not the time for...
What I find funny is that Grimlock contributes more in this movie than anyone else does after Hot Rod. But anyway, and maybe Ultra Magnus. I really like Ultra Magnus. But anyways, once they're all on board, Kup then begins to talk about, "This reminds me of the time on this other planet, and the Petro rabbits were out of control." And then he notices Grimlock shoving his nostril or his museau, his snout, right almost in his face. And you have Kup going, "Hey, get your noodle out of my face." "But Grimlock, love hearing about Petro rabbits." Just
he's funny, but it's like it's time and place. You're trying to escape a
heated battle,
but just one shot can probably wipe you out. And you're busy thrusting your snout in one of the pilot's faces, wanting him to tell a story.
Yeah! Grimlock just wants to hear some good Petro Rabbit stories. I love Grimlock in this movie. He's hilarious. But I will admit he's being a bozo. And of course, Grimlock admits that he does love these war stories. At which point he's told, "You're living one now," sharply. Kup's not in a good mood. He's stressed and frightened. Who could blame him? And I don't think he's got a war story that can compare with the level of danger they're currently in, or with the stakes.
I think it's like he retired to become more security.
Basically, well, I think he served more the capacity of kind of a strategic advisor of sorts. And yeah, he also saw to some basic security, clearly. But I'd argue he was probably a advisor for Ultra Magnus because Kup's experience is invaluable in this story. And, given how many battles he survived and that he's almost as old as Optimus, that's not something you throw away. Kup's still a really great fighter, but he's clearly getting up there in age. It's just that he's not the sort of guy you put on the front line. But he's clearly not someone you throw away either. So Optimus put him in the perfect sweet position of basically being a drill sergeant, almost mentoring the next generation. In particular, in hindsight, given that Optimus had a certain amount of foresight that Hot Rod was destined for greatness, putting Kup in charge of training Hot Rod was a good idea. The only thing is, Kup's clearly in over his head when it comes to mentoring this impetuous youth who will do whatever the heck he wants, whenever the heck he wants, for whatever reasons he wants. And I say that because Hot Rod is as rebellious as Rat Trap was. Maybe more in some ways. I'd say Cheetor, but Cheetor was actually the total opposite of Hot Rod in personality. Cheetor always did whatever he was told. Hot Rod never does anything that he's told. That's the difference between them. It's the difference between a young man who bucks at orders and the other one who's a yes man of sorts. And I'm actually going to say this. I like Cheetor, but he never had the potential Hot Rod did. Even if you put them at the same size or something, I'd argue Cheetor's not destined for greatness like Hot Rod is. Hot Rod has a touch of the Luke Skywalker in Anakin in him. What I mean is that spark. Arguably, Cheetor, as great as he is as a character, is rather more of a, how should I put it, a Jaren Mold. No, maybe not Jaren Mold. To make a Star Wars reference, he's like, he's almost the regular rebel soldier. Of the initial Maximals, he's the one with the least amount of potential. And he doesn't really amount to anything in comparison to the others. Which, to an extent, is fitting. But to another extent, if they were just going to focus on Rat Trap and Rhinox and Dinobot more, they should have actually had them amount to something. Rather than throwing those characters away for, as said, Silverbolt. A character who never amounted to anything. But anyways, as to Cup, he ends up telling Hot Rod to fire up the engines and whatnot. And Hot Rod does. And Cup then starts everything up. And it's here that we find out that Hot Rod's actually a pretty good co-pilot. And clearly Cup, you know what? Stick him in a ship. Maybe in a warship. He might not be able to fight like, Hot Rod can these days. Physically, but if you put him in a warship, he could fight as well as anyone. But of course, he's struggling with Grimlock, who's begging him, tell Grimlock about Petro Rabbits. I'll give you Petro Rabbits.
There's a part of Cup that reminds me of Rat Trap.
There's a part of him that reminds me of J. Jonah Jameson. Once the crews have escaped from the battle, we're just going to skip over the whole RC thing. No point. I'm just saying. But anyways, the Dinobots are just busy reveling in Cup's war stories. He's reveling in the attention because he likes to be the center of attention. Hot Rod is pouting and annoyed for some reason. And I don't know why. And he's practicing with a battle bot, I guess? I don't know what else to call it. Only for him to get distracted, it to hit him in the back, and then he gets angry at it, and it just tells him, time out, time out! When it clearly planned... Well, it clearly attacked when he was distracted. I think that thing is sentient to an extent, but that it's clearly an opportunist.
And doesn't like losing.
Yeah. Technically, it cheated to an extent. To an extent. Yes, it was his fault for getting distracted, but on the other hand, it's funny that it did what it did. But they're interrupted by the new Decepticon warship just firing almost a hole for the ship. Jeez, Galvatron's worse than the Terminator. I just mean, like, he's clearly not going to let them go. Cup refers to one of his war stories. Hot Rod asks him, well, okay, how'd you win that battle? I don't remember. We had a lot of casualties, is what Cub comments. Not reassuring at all.
Or the one war story you need to try and stop a bunch of
missiles. But, or maybe we should say nukes, given how they seem to detonate like them. But they try to kind of set them off safely or something with one of their own, I guess, traps, or their ship's own ray function of sorts. Doesn't work, but they do get them to detonate a little early against the front of the ship. Not very smart of them, but then again, they're dealing with alien technology. They don't really have any kind of previous experience with the technology that's directly connected to Unicron. Obviously, the Nemesis and the other Decepticon warships are not as advanced as this one in terms of weaponry and, well, overall. And Hot Rod, of course, cheers, trying to be an optimist, saying, well, we survived that. Yeah, bucko, but you're not going to survive the next attack with that kind of luck. Galvatron, getting tired of pursuing Hot Rod and Cup, decides, Cyclonus, you go deal with them. At which point, Cyclonus tanks the entire ship with like 3 or 4 shots. Wow! How powerful are these transmetal Decepticons?
Pretty powerful, apparently.
And Cyclonus is a puny wimp and a skinny little nerd compared to Galvatron. That's a scary thought. Of course, you have the ship that immediately starts to go down. They crash, and Hot Rod and Cup basically have to go for the abandoned ship mentality, while Ultra Magnus has Spinner all but screeching, going, "Hot Rod and Cup just went down!" With Ultra Magnus rebuffing him and trying to get him to focus on their own predicament. But you can't blame Spinner for just having the mentality. Like, my buddies might have bitten the bullet.
And Ultra Magnus essentially saying, we've got to worry about ourselves.
Yeah. And Ultra Magnus proves correct in saying, well, we ought to worry about ourselves. Decides to ditch half the ship, just as Galvatron's chucking some Decepticon warheads at him. Destroys a good chunk of that ship. And basically celebrates with him and, I guess, I don't know if it's Cyclonus or who it is, but they're basically already drinking their champagne, pulling out, I guess, the Hawaiian dresses, and they're about to have a grand party. Everybody's invited, even Scooby-Doo and Shaggy. When Unicron decides to torture Galvatron for winning a major battle. Okay. Yes, Galvatron's celebrating too soon before he's even won, but, like, why torture him? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Galvatron basically tore both ships apart and has yet to give the order scan for survivors. Yes, he's kind of making the assumption we've already won, but at least let the guy have 5 minutes for the adrenaline to get out and for him to say, all right, now scan for survivors just in case. Because, like, previously, from what we've previously seen of Megatron/Galvatron, he was the sort, all right, I've clear-cutted the enemy, now let's scan. No, he is careful like that. He's like, okay, I've conquered them for the most part, now I scan for survivors. Why? I want to make doubly sure. He is that villain. He's competent. But before he could even really give chase, Unicron tortures him. This one's on Unicron. No, them getting a heads up on, or even a 20 to 30 minute head start on Galvatron is entirely Unicron's fault, because if he didn't torture Galvatron here, Galvatron would have scanned for survivors and still probably sent people, some of his men out, to go survey the wreckage, scan for the Matrix, and otherwise try to figure out where all the body parts are. And then he would realize, ooh, they're not here. But the problem is, they're given a head start because Galvatron's too busy screeching in pain.
Yeah, even Beast Wars Megatron wouldn't punish Galvatron in this moment most of the time.
Well, actually, I think he would.
He would.
Except if it was Inferno. Inferno was the only one he liked. There were times when he tortured even his most loyal men, almost even Scorponok a few times, over just a simple mistake.
But he was willing to say, scan for survivors.
Not always. There were times when he didn't. A few times he did order it, and it came up blank, and then he assumed, yeah, I won. Which, in those situations, okay. But on the other hand, the trouble with Megatron was, half the time he was more incompetent than Pterosaur. The other half, he wasn't. But the thing about that Megatron was he was all muscle. But when you're that strong, I guess you can get by with what you've got. While Galvatron ends up, once some of the torture has subsided enough for him to talk, he begs his men, take me to Unicron, take me to him now, even as he's still being tortured. So for the entire trip, Unicron's torturing him. And it's going to take him days to get to Unicron. So essentially, what I would have said would have taken hours, but he would have made darn sure he could follow their, well, I don't want to say their warp space, but the trail of energy. that their ship obviously gives off, he would have been able to track them, and they would not have gotten a break. But thanks to Unicron, they get a break. They get to recoup and prepare for the battle that's to come. Unicron's his own worst enemy here.
At this point, Galvatron would have been better with Starscream in charge.
To an extent, I wouldn't go that far. But on the other hand, I think it's that the problem that he's facing is that he's on a leash. What Unicron should do is just let him off the leash. Just trust in that Galvatron could get the job done. On the other end of things, Ultra Magnus ends up, well, you've got RC who's whining like Rat Trap. Bear in mind, she's his great aunt. And she whines, did he have to detonate 3/4 of the ship? And Spinner, pretty much, you can almost see him rolling his eyes and going, okay, the enemy would have detonated 4/4. Which he's right. Ultra Magnus, for his part, asks if there's any place to set down for repairs. And he's told pretty much yes.
After Perceptor speaks in Reed Richards.
Yeah, and they set off for that. The next little bit's going to be the battle on the one shark transformer planet. I forget what it's called. But I love this part of the story. And we're going to cover the whole bit of it, I hope, in the next video. Because we're hoping to at least get to other Transformers stuff beyond just this movie. But yeah, like honestly, Unicron let Galvatron off the leash. That said, Unicron still rocks because he's voiced by Wells, and he is a great character in this movie. I hate his other portrayals because I find them boring and just they don't have the same gravitas as in this movie. Then again, the same goes for Hot Rod. Hot Rod and Unicron and Galvatron would never be as well portrayed. Even Optimus Prime would never be as well portrayed as they are in this film. But this was back when storytelling was a good thing. Was, well done, I should say. Sorry about that. I'm tired. Anyways, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you're Hot Rod nearly running over Cup.